Thanks for coming out. Thanks to John and Mark as well for setting this up. Obviously, Mark's not here tonight because he heard I was speaking, so great excuse not to come along. Ever so slightly kind of hoisted upon me too, in that Mark said, "Oh, do you mind coming along and doing kind of a 5-minute intro talk about what the Good Tech Conf is?" I said that'd be fine, and then I saw invites go out to tonight, and I was coming up as a speaker, which was a bit of a surprise. But I'd heard great things about Cassie's talk as well, and about previous talks that Cassie had given, and it was all true. So really nice talk, thank you. Right, okay, so tonight I'm talking about Good Tech Conf. More than happy to field questions as I go through, because if we're banking on just going through my content, we'll be done very quickly. So throw whichever curveballs come to mind. So first of all, about me, that picture was taken a couple of years ago, as you can probably tell. So I'm a partner at a company called Underscore Consulting, predominantly based in Brighton. We do predominantly functional programming, consulting, training and development stuff. There's about a dozen of us who are part of Underscore, but tonight's talk's not about Underscore. So outside of Underscore, I've also helped to set up and run a few tech conferences predominantly in London over the past few years. So probably the longest standing one, or the biggest one, is a Scala functional programming conference called Scala Exchange. And that normally runs for about 3 days, about 1,000 people, and that's probably been running for about 7 or 8 years now. As well as that, I've also run a couple of hackathons all over the place, often in universities, because we do, as part of Underscore, we do a lot of open source projects, and we tend to run a lot of hackathons around those projects. And this picture does take me back to when I was much younger, and probably at that time wanted to be Lee Major's The Fall Guy. Things have changed, and to a certain extent that is kind of what I do nowadays too, but the context is very, very different. And I think as you get older too, some of your desires and dreams and one thing and another change, which probably is a slightly cheesy segue into talking about the Good Tech Conf, which was a bit of a goal kind of mission challenge thing for this year, to try and bootstrap a different type of conference and see what kind of challenges would be involved in starting something new like that. So this is the homepage of conference. There's 4 of us who are involved in founding this, 2 of us based in Brighton, 2 based in London. A tech conference, a predominantly tech conference based in Brighton, happening in November, covering current and future tech and ethics in technology too. So we'll get into a bit of what all of that is about. So this was kind of inspired too by attending a conference last year run by a lady called Louise Ash, who does a really interesting conference called Meaning Conference based in Brighton. It's meant to find an underlying purpose behind people's businesses, product strategies, but it's slightly broader than that. So it tends to get both charities presenting, it tends to get a lot of non-profits, a lot of NGOs presenting there, as well as kind of some interesting tech talks about maybe how you can adapt your technology to not just be profit as the main driver, but also inclusion and diversity and other goals that maybe people over time have found to be as important as turning a profit, if not more important to some of these businesses. If you've not been to a Meaning conference, I'd strongly recommend attending one. I went to it last year, really good and interesting, really inspiring. The one thing that I kind of came away from that conference though feeling was wondering what I could do off the back of it. So it was great, but really gauged at business people. So how to run your business in this way, how to, innovative business models, things like donut economics, all of that kind of slightly curveball left of centre economic theories and business strategies. It was great, but I've spent too many years, probably, according to my eyesight anyway, staring at a screen and being a techie, and kind of left that conference thinking, that's great, now what can we code, what can we do, where do we go with this? And there wasn't kind of a landing point that I could then pick up and go, and here's something tangible that we can work on the output of this. So that is kind of what inspired the idea of doing Good Tech Conf. So Good Tech Conf, it's ironically this year happens on the Monday, Tuesday after the Meaning Conf on the Thursday, somewhat strategically placed, and it's a 2-day conference bringing together roughly 200 people to do a 1 day of talks and a 2nd day of kind of hacking, working on projects, seeing what we can hack out in a day, and these are going to be mentored and kind of tutor-led topics to hack onto. A minimum of 5 full-length talks, including a keynote talk. Lightning talks and speaker support is also welcome, so there's a CFP open for this. Anyone who has not given a talk before but wants to, we are more than keen to encourage and mentor and help and support in any which way we can. If people can't afford to attend the conference, and I think ticket price is something like £100 a ticket, but if someone's going to struggle to afford to attend the conference, or to travel to the conference, we'll also try and help to subsidise that based on kind of the criteria of who's attending. It's not for profit, it's backed by a community interest company that we've set up to bootstrap the conference from. So full-length talks, keynote speaker, lightning talks. We've got a roundtable discussion happening there at the end of the day too, which is around how you can maybe promote inclusion, diversity, and what the general ethical flow is within technology right now. Day 2, a guided hack day. Ideally looking at problems that are encountered by social enterprises. And we're going to try and get some of the themes and topics for that before the hack day. Also, the day of the conference itself, the first day, is held at the i360, the Brighton i360. It includes a free flight in the i360. I'm not sure if that's the greatest sell in the world, but it is part of the package. So, all right, so part of, to be honest with you, if I could have not set up a conference, I would have not set one up. Because it is more pain and hassle. Not that it's worth, it's quite a lot of pain and hassle, though. It's a bit like organising a wedding where you're neither part of the bride or groom's party and just hopeful that people will attend. So it's quite a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, but I'm hoping that the kind of output from it will pay dividends. So the first criteria that I was looking for after I'd attended Meaning was, is there a technical conference in Brighton or thereabouts which appeals to the kind of technology that I'm attracted to or that I've got involved with over the past X amount of years? So typically that's the kind of technology that is things like ops technology, so things like cloud native technologies, so Kubernetes and all that kind of stack, so that kind of thing, functional programming stuff, AI and machine learning stuff, VR, chatbots, all the stuff that is often referred to as like the back-end development stuff, I guess, but is not particularly front and centre or anything that I've seen a lot of conferences outside of London hosting, or not so many on the south coast anyway. So ostensibly it's a technology conference. If people just are interested in the technology and don't really want to make the world a better place, then there is enough content there over the conference for people to get engaged. However, that's not really the main driver of the conference. Technology is there, but it's kind of a bit of a side effect that goes along with ethics, which we're also going to discuss at the conference. So what are ethics in tech? Well, that's probably the first question that we should address during the conference, to be honest with you. So all different kinds of definitions of ethics. What is ethical technology? At least for Good Tech Conf, we're looking at ethical technology as including things like diversity in technology, inclusion in technology, onboarding of people within technology, and how you can hire for diversity, because realistically teams and technology and output and products, the teams that build those should be comprised of people who you see in everyday society, and if they're not, I think that has a massive skew on the output of the technology that you see. So the typical example, which I guess is often cited, is if you have a voice assistant, typically the voice of that voice assistant is a female voice, and typically a lot of those voice assistants, the teams that have put them together, are predominantly male teams. So it kind of influences, there's almost a pervasive edge where how you use that technology and barking commands at that technology kind of reinforces some of the stereotypes and non-inclusive activity that's already in tech. So maybe that's something that we should talk about when we talk about ethical technology. Also, what are the things that are on the horizon of ethical technology? So carbon footprints of data centers, things like deep fakes, if you've seen it, where you can take roughly 2 minutes of video footage of someone and you can superimpose someone's face on a different person and have them reiterate what that different person's saying as part of a conversation. Fake news, provenance of products. Provenance, I think, was probably a big thing in retail during the horse meat scandal of where do you know where the meat's coming from, how do you prove where the meat's coming from, supply chain management, and there's a whole different kind of raft of future technologies that are starting to look at that. Also things like AI and bots that work in the home and how they're being considered to maybe replace people for childcare and for palliative care and for old people's care. So, you know, in another 10, 20 years to come, if people are used to bots in the home, which are the main point of interaction and conversation for old people as opposed to family or friends contacting them, is that a direction that maybe society wants to go in? Is that a direction that people are comfortable with? Offloading a lot of the almost unpopular support tasks that were traditionally picked up by families and friends to technology, is that really the most ethical use of technology in the future? So yeah, we'll be talking about ethics. Also about social enterprises. So a bit of a call to action of what we can do over the one-day hackathon to try and build something and support something that might help a social enterprise, ideally within Brighton or the South Coast. So if we've got a charity that could do with 100 pairs of hands maybe to try and hack something out for a day, that's a topic that we'd be very keen to pick up, work on, and any of the money that goes beyond costs for the conference would then pay for support, patches, and hosting that for the year too. So it's probably worth noting too that social impact businesses are, social impact seems to be a additional plus point that a lot of startups seem to be using right now, and doesn't necessarily mean that it's not for profit, but it seems to be another additional selling point for startups that are kind of kicking off in the UK. And I guess a big one that seems to be often cited at the moment is a company called Beam, who have almost a Kickstarter to fund and sponsor and try and mentor homeless people, so that you can kind of track someone's progress and get them into jobs and kind of fund their first X amount of time while they kind of get back on their feet too. So it's probably worth mentioning too that jumping on the kind of ethical and future tech bandwagon is also a bit of a zeitgeist in technology right now. So right now you see places like the V&A that are hosting things like what is the future technology and what are the big questions that arise from the direction that technology is going in. So I've been to this, I took the kids to this exhibition, really interesting exhibition. It covers things like the use of technology and immortality, so whether people will freeze their bodies in the future, whether there's a certain set of drugs or stem cells or anything like that to prolong people's lives, whether ethically that's something that people should do, or whether what the actual ethical conversation is around that too. Also things like privacy in the future, using mobile phones and those being tracking devices, and the whole thing of, I guess, things like Facebook and tracking your social feed and trying to direct what news you receive to influence you in a specific way. Is that ethically a good direction? Is this traditional marketing just brought into the digital age? Or is there something slightly more sinister about that? Also things like autonomous technology and the responsibility around autonomous technology. So if you have a driverless car and that driverless car then hits somebody, who's responsible for that? Is it the person who programmed the car? Is it the person who was sat there who could have took over the wheel? Is there a proportion at which driverless cars hitting people is actually, that's an acceptable level because it's lower than the level at which manual drivers would hit people, or maybe for a certain band of, maybe for people who are, say, 70 plus, autonomous cars are fine because the incidence of accident is lower than it would be if someone of that age typically was driving. All kinds of kind of ethical questions that arise from the direction in which technology seems to be heading, which ever so slightly does present a bit of a dystopian future, which the kind of Black Mirror of the future. But it doesn't have to be like that because we've got things like Good Tech Conf and Code Bar and lots of other initiatives that are happening that are trying to either stem this or turn this around and provide a counterbalance to the ethical direction that some of this technology could head. So some of the speakers that have been confirmed for Good Tech Conf, we've got people like DataKind who are coming along. So DataKind, if you've not heard of them or they're new to you, they've been around for about 7 or 8 years. They're available in they have chapters in about 8 different countries. They do predictive analytics and data analysis for charities, so for the charity sector. So they do things like talk to groups like Shelter or food or homeless food distribution organisations and suggest where food could be distributed best to maximise the use, consumption and reduce the waste of that food being used. They do things like data dives too, which normally get something like 50 data scientists turning up, working with charities over a weekend and basically doing a hackathon for free over weekends too. Also got Lizzie Hodgson coming along, who is a bit of a force of nature and runs something called Think Nation over in Brighton. Typically does short films around technology and also runs events to try and get people, I think it's 14 to 20, more engaged and involved in technology. I'll just wait till the ambulance has passed. Okay. I think most recently, Think Nation were working with a chap who was part of the anonymous hack group and helped set up a spy museum in New York, which has a big part of that spy museum that's involved in kind of the digital age and hacking as spying. And they've recently run, in fact it might be running right now, something for all the schools within New York to attend a 2-day set of presentations and hackathon around kind of security and ethics in technology there too. Dave Gannell, who's someone I work with at Underscore, as partner at Underscore, really good speaker, very good trainer too, Brighton based, but outside of Underscore also has a product called Cartographer, which does data analysis and interpretation for environmental organisations and charities. So he'll be doing some kind of talks around that and around functional programming, data ingestion, and how that's used in the kind of environmental and charity sector. And lastly, we've also got Anne Curry, who's coming along too, who's an ops and automation expert. She was also the ethics track lead at QCon this year, and is putting together, she runs a group in London called Co-Ed Code, which is a diversity and inclusion group in London for technology, and she's running a conference later this year called Co-Ed Ethics, which is to encourage diversity and inclusion within technology too. Very dry. Okay. So partners of, any questions before I go on? I am eyeing up the drink, so if anyone's got a question while I can grab a drink, that's... No? Okay, I've only got 3 slides left, so we can power through those.
Do you have any big tech sponsors yet? Because if you're talking about cloud computing, you might want to get Amazon or Google or something to keep you... I presume you've got...
Let's carry on with the slides then. Let's just go, let's go there. All right, so partners of the Good Tech Conf, so Co-Ed Ethics, which again is the conference that Anne is running. That's the 13th of July in London. I'm going to be helping and run that too. Meaning Conf, also running in Brighton in November, which is more a business focus than our technical focus. And Think Nation, Lizzie has been a world of help in helping us bootstrap and get this going, really. A world of ideas and yeah, really incredibly helpful. So what we need, So I've said that I've run tech conferences for years and years, so in theory this should be easy. In practice, it's really not easy at all. I've been part of program committees, done talks at conferences. The operational side of it, I've realised, is almost the bigger side, flip side of that coin, and is incredibly difficult. I have a newfound respect for people who do that as part of their job. So what we need to get rid of more tickets, to be honest with you. We need sponsors. We've just recently, we're about 80% through getting our sponsor pack together. We're just finishing that off now. When I say finishing that off, that is being formatted and designed, and that should take about another week. Once we've got the sponsor pack together, then we are seeking sponsors. So yeah, seeking sponsorship. Mentors and hack helpers, anyone who's been involved in mentoring or hack groups, especially with a focus on inclusion and diversity. It's kind of awkward now I'm saying it, but yes, we are very interested in getting some support in that respect too. On the site, we've got a register interest page or form too, so if anyone is interested in getting updates about what we're up to, then please register interest or follow us on Twitter. We've also got the CFP open, so feel free to propose a talk as well. Finishing kind of the sandwich of, it's normally the feedback sandwich, but we had the low point of the Black Mirror, so I thought I'd try and end with some more positive reinforcing statements. So whereas I previously wanted to be the fall guy, and I've kind of stepped slightly away from that, at least directly being a stuntman, it does feel that we're at a point now where technology could take all kinds of different paths in the future, some of which are more inclusive and more diverse and reflect society better and probably lead to better products or more rounded products in the future, or it doesn't necessarily have to go that way. So the best way to predict the future is to build it yourself, or words to that effect. And also, the future belongs to people who try to chase their dreams and act upon them. So Good Tech Conf is the start of a journey for some of us to try and see where we want technology to go and what can we do to try and push it or nudge it in that direction. So that's kind of the spiel for the conference. Any questions?
Are you running the hackathon first and then showing it off on day two, or are you firing people up on day one and then...
So day one is talks. So day one is predominantly because we'll have some talks that we think might seed ideas for the hackathon, and some of the stuff that's in those talks will maybe show some different techniques or patterns or ways of doing things that in day two, the speakers will still be there to kind of guide people through it too. So it'll be a very kind of mentored hackathon on day two.
And are you looking for candidate organisations for that to be,
We're definitely looking for candidate organisations to get involved with the hackathon, to propose ideas, to be present. Basically, if you're interested in where technology is going and helping move it in what I think is the right direction, we're very interested in having a chat and seeing what we can do with that. So, yeah, shoot.
I can definitely help you.
Wicked, okay. Do you know what, that gets rid of a whole awkward conversation later, so great, thank you.
For the hackathon, what kind of level are you capping it at? Are you going to have like people who don't know what they're doing with people who do, and kind of like...
That's fine, we'll pair people up. Yeah, it's not an issue at all. So
you get CodeBar students involved?
Yeah, for sure. If people are very new to this and very early on in their coding career, the hackathon is there to support them to try and either get to that next level or get connected to people who can help them get further on. So yeah, for sure, there's not a minimum requirement to join.
Are you looking for the heavy lifting sort of building something side of things, or are you interested in the whole full service kind of from UR to interaction to sort of front end considerations, the back end sort of stuff?
Yes, we're interested in that. The people I'm generally connected to tend to focus on a lot of heavy lifting and automation stuff. Getting people in that kind of world involved in it, I can kind of do that quite easily. People from outside of that, from the kind of UX, UI front, I'm working with a chap at the moment who runs UX Brighton, a chap called Danny Hope. So I'm trying to tap into his network too, to try and get a few more people from that side of the world involved in this as well. So, but yeah, the intent is, if we can hack something out in that day that is at least a launch pad to continue with afterwards, yeah, for sure, the kind of full spectrum.
Do you have any charities in mind that might need help?
Yes, and it's slightly skewed, to be honest with you. So because of a few different previous, few different gigs and stuff in the past, I'm kind of hooked into some organisations that I think I'll be able to more easily get some sponsorship from. So two of the themes that we've specifically picked out for Good Tech Conf this year are food and packaging waste, and also any homeless related projects too. So yes. So
I'm currently making a very, very basic website for Sussex homeless support. I don't know if you've seen the big orange bus in Brighton.
No.
They went up to Windsor, yeah, they did. So a guy called Jim Deans, who's lovely, but has no idea about how tech can help him whatsoever, and they've basically refurbished a massive double-decker bus, put loads of beds in it to try and help with all the homeless people in Brighton, because they don't have places to sleep. So that
sounds really interesting. That sounds like the kind of thing too that probably a group like DataKind would be very interested in getting involved with as well. So, I mean, ironically, it's a bit like looking underwater at the iceberg, that since starting this, you realise that there's actually thousands of people, mainly in London, that are involved in a whole kind of Tech for Good movement, and that actually once you start chipping away at that, the Tech for Good movement is actually massive, but but it's you have to start punching holes in it before you see it, and then when you see it, it's and I think there is a raft of people who've done many years in tech, and now either want to try and kind of give something back to having done kind of okay off the back of that. There's no more content. Either want to give something back or hit that kind of milestone of seeing where tech's going and think that it could be a very uncomfortable place. We could be hitting kind of the tech Brexit, which not everyone is in favour of. So, yeah. Shoot.
Is the focus of the conference, is it sort of, because you mentioned good tech and tech for good, and meaning like, is it good tech meaning like we're going to do technology and here's how to do it with the least damage, or is it tech for good meaning how to actively use technology for social benefit?
It's the latter of those two.
Okay,
yes,
right.
I'm not too sure what the former of those two is, but the latter of those two sounded, so to influence tech but do the least damage.
Well, what I mean is, if you start talking about ethics of technology, you're getting into like, debates of like, I run a technology company for profit, I'm going to do this thing, it's got AI bots in it, and you're telling me how to do it with some diversity and this and that. So that's, to me, is like limiting the damage that this might otherwise do. Whereas technology for active social benefit is quite different.
So it's the latter of those two. The former of those two sounds much closer to the kind of topics that Meaning Conference covers. So if you're running an organisation, here's some they try and sow seeds of different directions that you might want to take that organisation, or influences that you might want to seed within that organisation. We're looking at the latter, which is, here's a set of problems. We're people who have a tendency to try and build things to solve problems. Can we get those two worlds to kind of come together or get a bit closer?
It's a bit like people saying that, we're going to organise the world's information, but for surreptitious reasons. Dropping the dead people thing.
I mean, I'd say, ironic. So Google are one of the few groups who do cloud hosting with a supposedly zero carbon footprint, whereas the much bigger hosting providers out there, like the AWS's, the Ali Clouds, and Alibaba's, the Ali Cloud stuff, which is enormous. have more of a carbon
Coal
footprint.
powered.
Yeah, yeah, well, quite, yeah. Any other questions?
Just one, you talked about the startups having a sort of a social responsibility, but there's a massive push now for big corporates to have their
Yes.
it's CSR, aren't they, and things like that. So you need to scratch a few companies and say, what are you doing for your CSR? This would be an ideal project to support us.
And hope, assuming that this is, assuming that it works this year, then the intent is that we'll try and do more events like this away from London next year too. So we try and do another Brighton or South Coast event, but also see which other pockets we could maybe target that aren't London centric, but where we could try and kickstart more of this too. So,
Cool.
all right, that's me done then. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Cheers.
Thank you.